Nia moved silently across the marble floor of JFK's Terminal 4, her mop gliding back and forth as early morning travelers rushed past. She kept her head low, earbuds tucked beneath her hoodie, and her name badge, smudged and ignored, clipped to her janitor's vest. It was just another shift, another day of being invisible. She preferred it that way. No questions, no conversations. Just cleaning up after people who never looked twice at the girl, wiping their footprints away. Only the occasional nod from the night guards reminded her she was even there. But something unusual stirred in the air that morning. From the far end of the terminal, a woman's panicked voice pierced the routine buzz. Her sharp accent cut through the noise. "Please. My husband! He needs medicine! No one understands." Heads turned, but no one moved. A few TSA agents exchanged confused glances. A security officer shrugged helplessly, fiddling with his radio. The woman stood near customs, flanked by 2 children, and an older man in a wheelchair. Her eyes scanned the crowd, wide with frustration. Nia paused, her hand tightening around the mop handle. She recognized the language. Dutch. Her heart skipped. No one was helping. The airport crew stood frozen, unable to understand or act. The woman's distress escalated, her voice rising in desperation. Without thinking, Nia pulled out her earbuds and stepped forward. She walked past the security rope, heart pounding. Her voice was calm but clear as she addressed the woman in fluent Dutch, asking what was wrong. The woman gasped in relief. She explained the man needed insulin. It had been misplaced during baggage screening. Nia turned and translated the issue in perfect English to a nearby TSA supervisor, then switched effortlessly to Spanish when another attendant chimed in. A few moments later, she added French to the mix to calm another official who had joined. The crowd watched in stunned silence. In less than 2 minutes, the medication was retrieved. The man received his insulin, and the woman clutched Nia's hands with tears in her eyes, whispering "thank you" over and over. Behind them, a tall man in a charcoal suit stood near Gate 23, arms crossed, eyes locked on Nia. His badge read, Drake, Director of Security. As Nia turned to return to her mop and cart, she felt his presence before she saw him. "You," he said simply, voice low but firm. She froze. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She wasn't supposed to interact with travelers, especially not cross the security line. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios, termination, blacklisting, maybe even legal trouble. Drake approached, expression unreadable. That was Dutch, and Spanish, and French. Nia lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he tilted his head slightly. "What's your name?" "Nia, sir. Nia Brooks. You work janitorial?" She nodded slowly. "Come to my office. Now." Her stomach dropped. She glanced toward her cart, the mop still damp, the handle slick with cleaner. Her hands trembled slightly as she followed him. Through the long glass corridor, past TSA desks and airline offices, she walked behind Drake, her footsteps quieter than ever. She didn't dare look up. What had she done? Stepped out of line? Broken some silent rule? The hallway ended in a frosted glass door with a silver handle. Drake opened it without a word and motioned for her to enter. Nia stepped inside, the cool air of the room wrapping around her like a warning. On the wall hung framed commendations and maps of airport zones. Behind the desk, a leather chair waited. Drake closed the door behind them and sat. She remained standing, hands clasped tight. He didn't shout. He didn't smile either. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled. "Who are you, really?" The silence stretched between them, thick and unbroken. Nia swallowed hard. Just a janitor. That's what she wanted to say. But something in his tone told her this wasn't going to be that kind of conversation. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling light. Nia stood motionless as Drake examined her, not with suspicion, but with something closer to curiosity. He tapped a pen on the edge of his desk, thoughtful but calm. "You handled that emergency better than any of my trained staff," he said, finally. "How many languages do you speak?" Nia hesitated. Her voice was quiet. 5, fluently. A few more at conversational level. Drake raised his eyebrows. "And you mop floors?" She looked down. "It's the only job that let me work nights." He leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on her. "Where did you learn all that?" Nia took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Library books, free online courses, old textbooks from thrift stores. I study after my shifts." He didn't interrupt. "My parents died when I was 17, she continued. "My little brother Ty was 10. I dropped out of school to raise him. I cleaned houses, stocked shelves, worked double shifts. Anything that paid. I couldn't afford college, but I could afford a notebook and headphones." Drake leaned forward, again elbows on the desk. "And nobody at this airport ever noticed? They weren't looking," Nia said softly. He stood and walked to the window, hands behind his back. "We've been struggling with diplomatic travelers for months," he said. "Miscommunications, cultural mistakes, frustrated VIPs. I've been told to fix it before it gets political. And then, today, a janitor handles an international incident in 60 seconds without breaking a sweat." Nia said nothing. He turned to face her. "I want you in a new role," he said. "Security Cultural Liaison. You'd assist with international guests, de-escalate language barriers, help our officers avoid diplomatic missteps." Nia blinked. "You'd really promote me?" "I'd test you first," he replied. 2-week trial. You'd report to me directly, but you'd leave janitorial." She stared at him, unsure if it was a trap, a joke, or something real. Drake reached for a folder and slid it across the desk. "Start tomorrow. Review the protocols tonight. And Nia?" She looked up. "You've already proven you're capable. Now show them." By the next morning, she wore a navy blazer and badge that didn't belong to maintenance. Her new desk sat beside the operations room, tucked between security monitors and translation booths. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. The uniform felt strange, the attention even stranger. Some staff nodded politely. Others barely masked their confusion. She could hear the murmurs behind her. "Isn't she the janitor? Since when do we promote floor scrubbers?" "She probably knows someone upstairs." Nia kept her head high. She'd heard worse, but the hardest moment came when she passed the janitorial break room. One of the women, Maria, who used to share shifts with her, looked up and gave a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Guess you're too good for bleach now," Maria muttered. Nia paused, unsure how to respond, then walked on. Later that day, she shadowed an officer during a customs inspection with a Brazilian official. The officer struggled. Nia stepped in with smooth Portuguese, bridging the conversation in moments. The official smiled, thanked her, and shook her hand. But back in the staff room, she found a printed flyer taped to her locker. "Fake it till you make it," written across her name. She crumpled it and stuffed it in her pocket. That evening, she returned to her apartment, greeted by the smell of burnt noodles and the sound of cartoons. Ty sat cross-legged on the floor, scribbling on homework pages. "Did they fire you?" he asked with wide eyes. Nia laughed quietly. No, kid. They promoted me. He leapt up. No way, she nodded, dropping onto the couch beside him. But, she added, not everyone's happy about it. Ty tilted his head. Because they're jealous? Because they don't expect people like us to climb, she replied. Ty grinned. That just means you have to climb higher. She smiled, ruffled his hair, and picked up one of his worksheets. They worked through math problems together until the clock hit midnight. When he finally fell asleep, she sat at the small table in the kitchen, reading protocol manuals under the flickering light. Highlighters marked pages like footsteps, leading her forward. She wasn't just studying to keep the job. She was preparing to defend it. And she knew the real challenge hadn't even started yet. Nia's second week in her new role began with silence that spoke louder than words. Colleagues who once waved now barely acknowledged her. Some looked past her entirely, as if pretending she didn't exist might return things to how they were before. Others whispered when she walked by, careful to smile when she turned around. She kept her head steady, her mind focused. Every morning, she reviewed flight logs and language protocols. She met with foreign consulate staff, assisted travelers with urgent paperwork, and resolved more miscommunications in days than the department had in months. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Her calendar started changing unexpectedly. Meetings she'd confirmed vanished without explanation. Files she submitted to supervisors were returned missing pages or altered altogether. One afternoon, a document she'd meticulously translated showed up in the system with glaring errors, and her name still on it. At first, she thought it was a glitch. Then it happened again, and again. When she brought it up, the responses were vague. Probably just a technical issue, someone said. Check with IT, another added. But the IT department had no records of changes made from her login. Still, she refused to panic. Instead, she began keeping her own records, screenshots, duplicate files, time-stamped folders backed up offline. If someone was trying to sabotage her, they'd have to work harder. That evening, she sat on the apartment floor beside Ty as he pieced together a school project with glue and glitter. She helped him cut out construction paper stars while explaining. Customs inspection forms in her head, practicing for tomorrow's training session. Ty glanced at her. You look tired. Nia smiled. I'm just thinking. About the people who don't want you there? She paused, surprised. You hear more than you let on, he shrugged. You always say, listen first, speak second. She leaned back, against the wall. Some people think I don't belong in the room. They're wrong, he said simply. The next morning, Nia arrived early to prepare for a high-level briefing with a visiting security delegate. As she walked into the conference room, she froze. At the table sat Officer Reddick, a senior supervisor known for his sharp suits and sharper temper. He looked up with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. I thought you were running this meeting, she said calmly. I was asked to take over, he replied. Last-minute change. She scanned the room. No one would meet her eyes. During the briefing, he presented a distorted version of her original report, filled with vague claims and mistranslated terms. She listened without blinking, though her jaw tensed with every slide. When the meeting ended, she approached him near the exit. You edited my files, she said quietly. Reddick turned, pretending surprise. I corrected them. There were mistakes. No, she said firmly. There were choices. He stepped closer, his voice low. You think you can rewrite the rules around here? You're just a footnote, Nia. A headline they'll forget in a week. She didn't flinch. Then why are you so afraid of me? He walked away without answering. That night, she stayed late, poring over logs, comparing submission times, collecting every piece of evidence she could find. Her hands trembled only once. When she found the altered login used to sabotage her report came from Reddick's department terminal. The next day, she stood outside Director Drake's office, a folder tucked beneath her arm. Her heart pounded, but her face was calm. Inside, he motioned for her to sit. "I need 5 minutes," she said. She laid the folder on his desk and opened it, explaining each piece of evidence, walking him through timelines, backup logs, altered documents, and the forged translations. Drake listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at the final page, then back at her. "You came prepared." "I had to be." He nodded once. "I'll take care of it." By the end of the day, Reddick had been called into internal review. He didn't return to his desk after lunch. As Nia walked through the terminal that evening, the air felt different. Not entirely safe, not yet warm, but still a shift. A young officer passed her and gave a short nod. A woman from the translation booth held the elevator for her without looking away. It wasn't applause, but it was a beginning. 2 weeks after the investigation began, Reddick's office was cleared out, quietly. No announcement, no fanfare. His nameplate was removed before sunrise, and his desk sat empty like a ghost that no one wanted to talk about. But people noticed. Whispers circled the break room. Questions swirled in private messages, and some staff tiptoed around Nia like she had become radioactive. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. The truth had spoken for her. A day later, Drake called her back into his office. He gestured toward the chair across from him, the same one where she once stood frozen, afraid. She might lose everything. This time, she sat tall, hands folded calmly in her lap. "I've reviewed everything," he said, flipping through a slim folder. "Your work has been sharp, consistent, and professional. You've handled pressure most people would fold under." She waited, unsure where he was leading. "I'm offering you the position permanently," he said. "Head of Cultural Security Relations." Her breath caught. "That's a department-level title." He nodded. "You've already done the job. Now it's official." She took a slow breath, letting the words settle. She wasn't just being acknowledged. She was being trusted. As she stepped out of his office, sunlight filtered through the terminal's massive windows, casting long shadows over the polished floors. For the first time, she didn't feel small beneath them. She felt grounded, steady, like she belonged. Her new office was modest, but full of meaning. A glass nameplate. Read Nia Brooks in clean, confident letters. On her first day in the role, she held that nameplate in her hands for a long time, remembering the mop handles and bleach-soaked gloves from just a month ago. She had never forgotten who she was. But now, the world couldn't forget her either. There were still hard days. A few staff remained cold, old habits clinging like dust. But others surprised her. The same officer who once ignored her now asked for help drafting policy notes. A supervisor who'd once rolled his eyes now invited her to lead a cultural training session. Respect, she learned, didn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it came in small gestures, in the willingness to listen instead of dismiss. One afternoon, she paused near the food court, watching travelers pass in a blur of rolling suitcases and overhead calls. Her phone buzzed. It was Ty. His message read, "They just asked me to give a speech at school about someone I look up to. I'm choosing you." She smiled, heart full. That night, she returned home late. the hallway quiet. She found Ty asleep on the couch, a notebook clutched to his chest. She covered him with a blanket and sat beside him, staring out the window at the blinking city lights. He had once looked at her and seen a sister who never gave up. Now the world was beginning to see it too. Weeks passed. The position came with more responsibility than she'd imagined. Briefings with federal staff, delicate conversations with diplomats, long nights reviewing procedures. But she handled it with the same focus she had once used to scrub airport tiles until they shone. She didn't forget the ones who still worked those jobs. She greeted janitors by name, asked about their families, left thank you notes in the supply closets. It wasn't pity, it was memory. She had lived in those shoes. She still wore them, in spirit. One morning she stood in the center of Terminal 4, watching the sunlight warm the marble floors. The same spot where she had once felt invisible, where she had translated desperate words and believed she'd crossed a line she couldn't return from. Now, it was her place, her ground, her story. She didn't walk faster. She didn't straighten her badge for anyone else. She simply stood with quiet strength. Change hadn't come with shouting or slogans. It had come with patience, with courage, with the simple act of stepping forward when no one else would. And that, she knew, was more powerful than any title.